My name is Julesson Park, and for 8 months I let my fiancé believe I was the kind of woman who made do. I didn't have to fake the lifestyle, just the numbers. I lived in a small duplex off South Lamar in Austin with creaky floors and a temperamental air conditioner that rattled like it had unresolved anger issues. I drove a sun-faded 2014 Corolla with a scratch along the passenger door that I never bothered to fix. I packed my lunches in mismatched glass containers and reused grocery bags like they were heirlooms. None of that was performance. I genuinely prefer quiet over flash, comfort over spectacle. But the income attached to that quiet life, that was very carefully curated fiction. The truth is, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a quant risk manager at Lone Star Meridian Capital. I build stress testing models for credit portfolios. When banks want to know how badly things will fall apart in a downturn, I'm one of the people who runs the simulations. It's meticulous work. It rewards paranoia. It pays accordingly. My base salary is $196,800, and my bonus fluctuates enough that I've trained myself not to emotionally count it until it hits my account. Caleb thought I made about $45,000. He believed that because 4 months into dating him, I split my paycheck like a card trick. My real direct deposit went into a credit union account he didn't know existed. The account he did know about, my large national bank, received a clean, predictable $1,200 transfer every month. That was my visible life. That was the account he saw when he casually glanced over my shoulder while I paid for dinner. That was the account he referenced when he said things like, "We should set up a better budgeting system for you." He wasn't condescending, not overtly, but he was comfortable taking the lead financially. Comfortable enough that I wanted to see why. Before you decide I was playing games, you need to understand where I come from. My mother, Min Park, ran a dry cleaner in North Austin for 20 years. She believes in preparation the way some people believe in destiny. Growing up, she used to tell me that when someone smiles too quickly, you ask yourself what they're collecting. Time, attention, money, people always collect something. I watched my cousin get engaged to a man who memorized her coffee order and her paycheck schedule with equal precision. By the time she called off the wedding, he had borrowed nearly $30,000 and convinced her she was selfish for asking about it. That lesson didn't leave me. So when Kayla began asking about my salary in that breezy, affectionate way, like it was pillow talk, I didn't panic. I adjusted. Caleb Wren is 36. He works in business development for a home renovation company and says it with the confidence of someone pitching venture capital. He's charming in a way that feels organic, not rehearsed. He remembers the name of every barista and compliments strangers like it costs him nothing. He leases a Range Rover Evoque and parks it where the badge catches sunlight. He isn't foolish. That's what made me careful. A foolish man burns out quickly. A smart one calibrates. I loved him. That part wasn't strategy, but I noticed patterns. The way he asked what I planned to do next career-wise whenever I mentioned a project at work. The way he leaned in when I paid for something expensive, watching without appearing to watch. The way he framed conversations about the future around security and building together, but always with subtle emphasis on what he could provide. I didn't correct him when he told his family I did bookkeeping. The first time he said it was at his mother Maribel's condo in Westlake Hills. She stood in her minimalist kitchen, white marble, pale wood, a vase that probably cost more than my car payment, and asked what I did. Caleb answered for me. She works in accounting, keeps things organized. He said it affectionately, like it was charming. I could have clarified. I didn't. Instead, I watched. Maribel's expression softened into something polite and vaguely relieved. Candace, his sister, smiled the way people smile at dental hygienists. Respectful, but ranked. Parker, Candace's husband, nodded and asked if tax season was busy. That moment told me more than any question would have. If they thought I was small, I wanted to see how they treated small. So I leaned in. I brought modest wine to dinners instead of the kind I actually drink. I mentioned clipping coupons once and watched Candace's eyebrows rise 0.5 millimeter. I wore the same thrifted cardigan twice to family gatherings just to see if anyone noticed. They did, and their assessment never shifted upward. 8 months of this quiet experiment gave me a front row seat to something I might have missed if I'd shown up as myself from day one. I saw how Maribel framed conversations about protecting assets before Caleb and I were even engaged. I saw how Candace described relationships like mergers. I saw how Caleb's confidence subtly expanded when he believed he earned more than I did. I wasn't testing love, I was testing character. And character always reveals itself around money. What I didn't expect, what I was slow to catch, was that while I was studying them, someone might have been studying me back. The first real shift happened on a Monday afternoon in late October when Maribel invited me over for tea. She didn't say, "Come by." She said, "I'd love a quiet chat, just us girls." In that tone women use when they've already decided the outcome of the conversation. Her condo in Westlake Hills always feels staged, like it's waiting for a photographer who never arrives. White oak floors, sculptural light fixtures, and furniture arranged with enough space between pieces to suggest both wealth and emotional distance. She poured chamomile into thin porcelain cups and asked about the duplex in a way that sounded like concern, but landed like appraisal. "Is the area safe?" she asked, stirring honey into her own tea even though she hadn't tasted it yet. "Austin is changing so quickly." I assured her it was fine. It is fine. I like my neighborhood. I like that the coffee shop barista knows my order and that my neighbor practices guitar badly, but enthusiastically at 7 p.m. every Thursday. But Maribel nodded the way someone nods when they've already categorized your life as temporary. Then she slid a folder across the marble island. It was subtle, no dramatic flourish, just a smooth, practiced motion. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice soft and warm, "this is simply to protect Caleb's future. You understand, we've worked very hard to build what we have. You wouldn't want him to lose everything if something ever happened. Everything." The word hovered there, inflated. Inside the folder was a prenuptial agreement. Neatly tabbed, pre-printed signature lines flagged with small pastel stickers. I remember thinking how organized it looked, like it had been waiting for me long before I arrived. I didn't react the way she expected. I didn't blink or stumble over legal terminology. I didn't ask Caleb to explain it to me later. I thanked her, folded the document back into the folder, and said I'd review it carefully. That night, at my kitchen table under the hum of my overhead light, I read it line by line. Risk modeling trains you to look for asymmetry. Who benefits when things go wrong? Who absorbs the shock? Most of the agreement was standard. Separate property remains separate. Premarital assets protected. No claim to family-owned businesses. Aggressive, but not unusual. Then I reached the disclosure clause. Both parties shall provide full and complete financial disclosure of all assets, debts, obligations, liens, and encumbrances prior to execution. Both. Not the lower earning spouse, not the incoming party. Both. I read it 3 times. They assumed I had nothing to disclose beyond a Corolla and a modest savings account. But the clause required Caleb to disclose everything, too. Every debt, every payment plan, every outstanding obligation. That's when something cold and sharp slid into place in my mind. Because Caleb had been increasingly curious about my finances lately, not in a hostile way, in a let's plan our future way. He'd started offering to help me optimize my savings. He'd once casually asked if I carried any credit card balances. I'd said no. He'd smiled in approval. Approval. The word bothered me, so I opened the bank account he knew about, the curated one. I hadn't checked it closely in months because it only held my visible $1,200 monthly transfers. But when I scrolled through the transaction history, I saw charges that didn't belong to me. A steakhouse in downtown Austin on a Tuesday night when I'd been in Dallas presenting to a risk committee. A $318 charge at a men's boutique on South Congress. A wine shop purchase in Bee Cave. I don't drink red wine. Caleb does. At first, I thought I'd forgotten something. Then I kept scrolling. Streaming subscriptions I didn't authorize. A car wash membership. A golf store purchase. The pattern wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Small enough to blend into the background of someone who doesn't obsessively monitor her account. But I do obsess over patterns. I didn't confront him. I documented. I opened a spreadsheet and logged every questionable transaction. Date, vendor, amount. Then I cross-referenced my calendar and work badge logs. I created a column labeled Juleson's location and filled it with meeting rooms, conference flights, office timestamps. By midnight, I had 27 transactions totaling just under $2,000. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. While Maribel was preparing a legal document to protect her son from me, her son had been using my debit card. Not openly. Not with permission. Quietly. 2 weeks later, Maribel called again, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "I had the loveliest thought," she said. "Candace and I could help you refresh your place. A little makeover before the wedding. My treat." It wasn't generosity. It was reconnaissance. I agreed. Then I sanitized. Every pay stub, every investment statement, every bonus summary went into a fireproof pouch and into the trunk of my car. My work laptop disappeared into a locked drawer. I left out exactly what they expected to see: my modest bank statement, my practical furniture, my making do life. When they arrived, they didn't waste time. Maribel opened cabinets to see how the space flows. Candace assessed my closet with the careful eye of someone evaluating inventory. She offered me a few pieces she'd planned to donate, her tone soft but patronizing. I stood there and let them. Because what I needed wasn't their approval. It was confirmation. And by the time they left, after cataloging my life with polite smiles, I knew something with absolute clarity. They believed I brought nothing to the table. And Caleb believed he could take from it without me noticing. They were wrong on both counts. The dinner where they planned to have me sign the prenup was scheduled for a Saturday night in early November, 2 weeks after the makeover visit. Caleb framed it as casual, just family, just wine, just getting paperwork out of the way so we could focus on the fun parts of being engaged. I agreed easily. I'd already met with Daria Hightower twice by then. The prenup had yellow tabs sticking out of it like warning flags, and the spreadsheet documenting the debit card charges had grown from 27 entries to 34. Patterns don't slow down on their own. They escalate. Maribel's condo looked especially polished that night, as if the walls themselves were aware something strategic was about to happen. Candace had arrived early. Parker was at the island opening a bottle of Cabernet, the good kind this time. Caleb kissed my cheek when I walked in, warm and familiar. That's the version of him that made all of this hurt more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I let myself feel the version of our life that could have existed if honesty had been part of it. Dinner was composed but tense underneath. Maribel made sea bass with lemon and capers and narrated the preparation like a cooking show host. Candace asked about wedding venues in a tone that suggested she'd already shortlisted options within what she believed was my price range. Caleb squeezed my knee under the table once, a silent cue. I didn't look at him. When the plates were cleared and Parker drifted toward the balcony with his wine, Maribel reached for her bag. "Well," she said lightly, "since we're all together." Stephanie wasn't there this time, but the folder was. Same pastel tabs, same pre-flagged signature lines, 3 pens placed neatly beside it. Caleb smiled at me, reassuring. "It's straightforward," he said, "just so we can move forward without any weirdness." Weirdness. I picked up the document and flipped through it slowly, letting the pages breathe. I wasn't reading it for the first time. I was giving them the performance of someone reading it for the first time. The room grew quieter. Candace watched me like she was monitoring a stock ticker. Maribel's fingers rested lightly on her wine glass stem. Then I looked up. "I'd feel more comfortable having my attorney review this before I sign," I said calmly, "just to make sure everything's clear." The silence that followed was almost elegant. Caleb blinked first. "Your attorney?" "Yes," I said. "It's standard practice." Maribel's smile tightened but didn't disappear. "Of course, sweetheart, it's just boilerplate." "Right," I said gently, "and boilerplate can still be reviewed." Candace shifted in her chair. "Is that really necessary? It's pretty simple." "For something that protects everyone," I replied evenly, "it shouldn't be a problem." That was the moment the temperature changed. It wasn't explosive. No one raised their voice, but the room recalibrated around me in a way I'd never felt before. They weren't looking at the bookkeeper anymore. They were looking at an obstacle. Caleb leaned closer. "Babe, lawyers are expensive. We don't need to complicate this." "I already consulted one," I said. The truth landed quietly but heavily. Maribel set her glass down. "You've already involved counsel?" "I wanted to understand what I'd be signing," I said. "That's reasonable." No one could argue with that without exposing themselves. Caleb's jaw tightened, just slightly. I'd seen that expression once before when a client backed out of a renovation deal at the last minute. It was the look of someone recalculating. "Okay," he said slowly. "What did your lawyer say?" "That the disclosure clause applies to both of us." Candace frowned faintly. "What disclosure clause?" I turned the document around and tapped the paragraph. Full and complete financial disclosure from both parties. Assets, debts, obligations. Maribel's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough. "Yes," she said smoothly. "That's standard." "Great," I replied. "Then it won't be an issue." Caleb's hand left my knee, because here's what he knew that they didn't know I knew. His disclosure wouldn't match reality. The debit card charges were one thing, annoying, unethical, possibly prosecutable. But Daria had helped me dig further. Public filings, UCC liens, payment records tied to his business commissions. Caleb carried far more debt than he'd ever admitted. Credit cards, a personal loan, a lingering balance on the Range Rover lease extension. None of it catastrophic alone. But together, significant. If he disclosed it honestly, Maribel would see it in writing. If he didn't, the prenup would be voidable. Either way, the trap wasn't mine. It was theirs. "Of course," Maribel said finally. "Take it home. Review it. We want everyone protected." Her tone had shifted from condescension to control. I nodded and slipped the folder into my bag. We finished the evening politely. Dessert was served. Candace complimented my dress in a way that sounded like a correction. Caleb kissed my temple when we left, but his hand lingered a little too long, a silent question he didn't voice until we were in the car. "Why didn't you tell me you talked to a lawyer?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "Why didn't you tell me you'd been using my debit card?" I replied. He didn't answer immediately. "I thought we were building something together," he said instead. "So did I." The city lights blurred past the windshield. For the first time since we'd gotten engaged, I felt something solid settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. He hadn't expected resistance, and now he was going to have to decide whether he wanted transparency more than control. So was I. The confrontation didn't explode that night. It unraveled over the next 48 hours, thread by thread, until there was nothing left to pretend we were holding together. On Sunday morning, Caleb acted as if nothing had shifted. He made coffee in my kitchen, kissed my forehead, and asked if I wanted to look at wedding venues that afternoon. The performance was almost impressive. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have believed him. But clarity has a way of dulling charm. Every movement felt studied, every smile felt placed. By noon, my phone buzzed. "Maribel." I let it go to voicemail. Her message was smooth but edged. "Sweetheart, I just want to reassure you that this prenup is purely protective. We don't want misunderstandings between families. Call me when you can." Between families. As if this were a merger and not a marriage. I spent the afternoon at my dining table with my laptop open, the prenup on one side, and my spreadsheet on the other. Daria had suggested one more step before escalating anything formally. Request the full disclosure in writing. Not emotionally, not accusatorily, just cleanly. So I drafted an email to Caleb. Per Clause 6, I'll need your completed financial disclosure, including all outstanding debts and obligations, before proceeding further. Once both disclosures are complete, my attorney will review. It was neutral, almost clinical. He responded within 12 minutes. "You're blowing this out of proportion. No numbers attached, no disclosure form." By evening, he was at my door. He didn't knock softly this time. He knocked like someone who believed they still had rights to the space. I opened it. "Why are you making this adversarial?" he asked immediately, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "I'm not," I said. "I'm following the agreement your family drafted." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "It's just paperwork, Jules. You're acting like I've done something criminal." I held his gaze. "You've used my debit card 34 times without telling me. That's different." "How?" "We're getting married." The sentence hung there, as if that justified everything. I walked to the counter and pulled out the printed spreadsheet. I slid it toward him. Date, vendor, amount, total. His eyes skimmed the page, then hardened. "I was going to pay it back." "You didn't." "I didn't think you'd notice." There it was. Not apology, not denial, just admission framed as inconvenience. "You didn't think I'd notice," I repeated quietly. He exhaled sharply. "It wasn't thousands." It's over $3,000. He waved that off. That's not life-ruining money. It's not about the amount. He looked frustrated now, like I was missing the point of his argument. I didn't want to ask you every time, he said. You're weird about money. Weird. Because I tracked it. Because I asked questions. Because I didn't assume love meant access. And what about your disclosure? I asked. His jaw tightened. What about it? You're required to provide full financial disclosure. I will. Then send it. He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the wall behind me instead, calculating. The silence stretched long enough to confirm what I already knew. How much do you think I owe? He asked finally. Enough that you don't want it in writing. He laughed once, short and humorless. Everyone has debt. Yes, I said, but not everyone hides it while asking someone else to sign legal protections. His face shifted then, not defensive, not charming, cornered. My mom pushed the prenup, he said. You know that. You signed it. That doesn't mean I wanted it. But you wanted the protection. He didn't deny that. For a moment, the room felt smaller. I could see the exact point where the version of him I loved and the version standing in front of me split into two separate people. I thought you trusted me, he said, softer now. I trusted the person I thought you were. And who is that? Someone who wouldn't quietly use my money while preparing legal paperwork to protect his own. He flinched at that. This is insane, he muttered. No, I said evenly. It's accounting. The truth is, I didn't feel dramatic. I didn't feel hysterical. I felt calm in a way that only comes when all variables line up. He wasn't just careless. He was entitled to access, entitled to assumption, entitled to protection. And when entitlement meets documentation, it rarely wins. I need the full disclosure, I said again. Income, debts, liabilities, all of it. And if I don't, then I won't sign. He stared at me, searching for hesitation. There wasn't any. Are you really going to throw this away over paperwork? He asked. I'm not throwing anything away, I replied. I'm refusing to sign something built on incomplete information. He picked up the spreadsheet again, staring at the total at the bottom. $3,214. A small number compared to my income, but a large number compared to trust. I'll send the disclosure, he said finally. Make it accurate. He left without kissing me goodbye. When the door closed, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, but clearer. Like a fog had lifted and left behind only hard edges. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and emailed Daria. He's stalling. Prepare for escalation. Because whether he realized it yet or not, the conversation was no longer about a prenup. It was about whether the man I was going to marry could survive transparency. And I was done pretending transparency was optional. Caleb didn't send the disclosure the next day, or the day after that. What he sent instead were long, carefully worded texts about partnership and not turning this into a legal battle. He tried calling twice during work hours, which he never did before. When I didn't answer, he sent a message that said, I feel like you're choosing a lawyer over me. That sentence sat on my screen for a long time, because it was almost clever. It reframed accountability as betrayal. It suggested that asking for documentation was an act of disloyalty. And for a few minutes, I let myself feel the tug of it. I imagined an alternate version of myself, the one who didn't run risk models for a living, apologizing, softening, deciding love mattered more than numbers. But love that fears numbers isn't love. It's leverage. On Wednesday afternoon, I received an email attachment from Caleb. No greeting, no explanation. Just a PDF titled Financial Disclosure. I opened it slowly. Income, $118,000. I blinked. He did not make $118,000. I knew that because I'd already cross-referenced publicly available compensation data for his role in company. His base was closer to $72,000, with commissions fluctuating. He had inflated his income by nearly $50,000. Total outstanding debt, $19,500. That number was almost funny. Between credit cards, a personal loan I'd uncovered through a county filing, and a lease extension balance on the Range Rover, the real figure was closer to $64,000. And that was conservative. He hadn't just understated his debt. He'd overstated his income. I leaned back in my chair and let the math settle. If I had signed the prenup as written, the agreement would have categorized him as the higher-earning spouse and me as the lower. In the event of divorce within the first 5 years, the lower earning spouse forfeited claims to shared property acquired during the marriage. They thought I was bringing nothing. He had positioned himself as the financial pillar, except the numbers didn't hold. I forwarded the document to Daria with one line. It's materially inaccurate. She responded in under an hour. Then we proceed formally. That evening, Caleb showed up again. This time, he didn't knock hard. He knocked carefully, like someone approaching a skittish animal. I sent it, he said when I opened the door. I saw. He stepped inside and watched my face, searching for reaction. Well, he asked. It doesn't match public records. He stiffened. You ran a background check on me? I verified information. That's not normal. It is when you're asking someone to sign a legal contract. He paced once across my living room. You're making this sound like fraud. If the numbers aren't accurate, that's exactly what it is. He stopped pacing. It's close enough, he said finally. Close enough. I almost laughed. Close enough works in horseshoes, I said. Not in contracts. He ran his hands over his face. Why are you doing this? My mom thinks you're trying to trap me. Your mom drafted the trap. That's not fair. Is it fair that you inflated your income? He didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and revealing. I didn't want to look bad, he said quietly. There it was. Not necessity. Not oversight. Image. You wouldn't look bad if you were honest, I replied. You don't understand what it's like in my family, he said, voice tight. Image matters. And reality doesn't? He hesitated just long enough. I realized then that this wasn't about the prenup anymore. It wasn't about the debit card charges or the inflated income or the buried debt. It was about presentation. Caleb curated himself the same way I had curated my visible bank account. The difference was intent. I had hidden strength to observe behavior. He had hidden weakness to maintain status. And only one of those strategies collapses under scrutiny. I need the real numbers, I said. And if I don't give them to you, then there's nothing left to sign. He stared at me like I'd just announced a natural disaster. You're willing to end this over paperwork? No, I said softly. I'm willing to end this over dishonesty. The words surprised even me in their steadiness. For a brief second, I saw the version of him I'd fallen for. The warmth, the easy laugh, the man who remembered how I take my coffee. But layered over it now was something else. Calculation, pride, fear of being exposed more than fear of losing me. You're not who I thought you were, he said. I nodded. That's the point. He left without another argument. After the door closed, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my credit union app, the one he never knew about. The numbers there were solid, steady, real. I thought about how carefully I had built this experiment, how much patience it had required, how much restraint, and I realized something quietly devastating. I had set out to test his family, but the only person who had truly failed the test was him. By the end of that night, I emailed Daria a single sentence. Prepare the formal notice, because transparency had been offered and rejected. Daria sent the formal notice on Friday morning at 9:12 a.m. It was clean, precise, 3 pages, single-spaced, written in the calm, devastating tone of someone who bills by the hour and doesn't waste adjectives. It outlined the discrepancies between Caleb's disclosed income and publicly verifiable compensation data. It itemized the debt inconsistencies. It referenced the unauthorized debit card charges and requested reimbursement within 10 business days. It concluded by stating that until accurate disclosure was provided, I would not execute the prenuptial agreement and reserved all rights under applicable law. There were no threats. There didn't need to be. By 10:03 a.m., Caleb had called 5 times. I didn't answer. At 10:17, a text came through. You involved my mother. I hadn't. Daria had CC'd Caleb only, which meant Maribel had read it, which meant Caleb had shown her, which meant the illusion was collapsing faster than he expected. At 11:42, Maribel herself called. I let it ring twice before picking up. Julesson, she said, her voice tighter than I had ever heard it. This is completely unnecessary. Accurate disclosure is necessary, I replied evenly. You're humiliating Caleb. No, I said. He did that himself. A long pause. You're overreacting to small discrepancies. They aren't small. It's family, she pressed. These things are handled privately. They are, I said. That's why I hired an attorney. Her composure thinned. If you cared about him, you wouldn't drag this out. If I cared, the emotional pivot. I care about honesty, I said quietly. Without that, there's nothing to protect. She didn't respond to that. She shifted tactics. You've misrepresented yourself too, she said. You let us believe you earned less. There it was, the part that stung because it was true. I never signed a legal document stating my income, I said, and I never used Caleb's money without permission. Silence. The kind that acknowledges a checkmate without saying it. She hung up without goodbye. Caleb came that evening. He didn't knock this time. He texted from the parking lot. Can we just talk? I stepped outside instead of letting him in. The Texas heat was still clinging to the pavement even though the sun had dipped low. He looked tired. Not theatrically tired. Genuinely worn. You didn't have to do it like this, he said. How else should I have done it? We could have worked it out. I asked you to send accurate numbers. He looked down at his hands. I was going to fix it. When? After the wedding. The honesty of that answer was almost worse than another lie. So I was supposed to marry you first, I said slowly, and then find out? He exhaled sharply. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the one standing in front of him. I didn't think you'd care this much, he admitted. That sentence told me everything. He hadn't thought I would care about the debt, or the charges, or the inflated income. Because in his mind, I didn't have leverage. I didn't have options. I was the modest bookkeeper in the duplex. He underestimated the wrong variable. I cared enough to check, I said. He swallowed. Did you ever plan to tell me what you actually make? He asked. Yes. When? When I knew you weren't measuring me by it. The words landed between us like something breakable. He gave a short, humorless laugh. So this was a test? No, I said. It was observation. And I failed. I didn't answer, because the truth didn't need embellishment. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking toward my car, my building, my ordinary life. You're not who I thought you were, he said again. I know. For a moment, I felt the weight of what we were losing. The version of our future that included wedding plans and shared mornings and inside jokes. It wasn't fake. It just wasn't built on stable ground. I'll pay you back, he said quietly. All of it. I know you will, I replied. Not because I trusted him, but because now it was documented. He hesitated, like he was waiting for me to soften, to say this was salvageable, to give him one more path back to the version of me who believed charm was character. I didn't. I'm withdrawing from the agreement, I said, and from the engagement. The words felt steady leaving my mouth. He closed his eyes briefly. So that's it? Yes. He nodded once, tight. I did love you, he said. I believe you, I answered. But love without honesty isn't partnership. It's performance. He didn't argue. He got in his car and drove away. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, then walked back inside my duplex. The floors still creaked. The air conditioner still rattled. My mismatched glass containers were stacked neatly in the cabinet. Nothing looked different. But everything was. I opened my credit union app and transferred the $3,240 reimbursement that had already posted that morning into my investment account. Clean, closed. Then I sat at my kitchen table, alone, and let the quiet settle. I hadn't lost everything. I had verified it. Trust actions more than charm. And always read the fine print, both in contracts and in people. If someone pressures you to skip questions, that's your cue to ask better ones. Protect your peace like it's an investment portfolio, because it is. And if you enjoy stories where spreadsheets beat manipulation, subscribe to Revenge Protocol on YouTube and drop a comment. Your gut instinct deserves a fan club.